On my sister's birthday, when she stepped up to give her speech, my uncle yelled, "You shouldn't even be here after what you did." Everyone fell silent, and my sister ran off crying. A few hours later, when she returned, she had someone with her who changed everything. It started like any other family celebration, with laughter, overcooked burgers, and cheap wine in my parents' backyard in South Carolina. The occasion was my younger sister Maureen's 33rd birthday, and despite everything that's happened over the years, the distance, the tension, the quiet rifts we never named, my mom was determined to bring the whole family together for it. I was standing by the picnic table, nursing a warm glass of Pinot Grigio, when Maureen clinked her fork against her glass. She smiled, a little nervous, the way people do when they're about to speak in front of people who've known them since they were in diapers. My cousin Jonah nudged me and whispered, "She's gonna cry, guaranteed." I gave him a sideways look but didn't say anything. Maureen opened her mouth to speak. "Thank you all for coming," and then it happened. My Uncle Dermot, my father's older brother, stood up, red-faced and bitter. "You shouldn't even be here after what you did," he spat across the table. Everyone froze. You could hear the wind rustling through the oaks. Maureen's face went pale, like her blood just evacuated her body. Her lips trembled, and before any of us could react, she turned and bolted into the house. The back door slammed shut behind her. No one moved. My mom's mouth was half open, trying to form words that wouldn't come. My father looked like someone had just hooker punched him. Jonah stared down at his plate. It was like the party had been hooked into a vacuum. For a few seconds, I stood there trying to process what just happened. Maureen had been off the radar for years, yes. She moved around a lot, stayed quiet about certain things. But this wasn't just about family gossip or some old grudge. This was venom. I turned to Uncle Dermot. "What the hell was that?" He didn't look at me. Just grabbed his drink and walked away toward the trees. The crowd slowly resumed conversation, awkwardly shifting topics like nothing happened. But the tension didn't leave. It just floated around us like humidity. I went inside the house, hoping to find Maureen. Her old bedroom door was shut. I knocked. No answer. I tried again. "It's me. You okay?" Silence. Then, muffled through the door, "Please, just give me a minute." I backed off. About 20 minutes later, the car was gone. She'd left. The party limped along. No one brought her up. It was like we were all pretending she'd never even tried to speak. But something inside me itched. I couldn't shake it. What did Dermot mean? What had Maureen supposedly done? I waited. 2 hours passed. People were gathering their things. The cake was half eaten. Then headlights cut across the yard. Maureen stepped out of the car, face calm now. Her makeup was cleaned up, her posture deliberate. She wasn't alone. A tall man in a charcoal blazer stepped out behind her. Mid-50s, maybe. Confident, professional. They walked across the grass together. Maureen didn't say anything at first. She just climbed onto the same small step stool she had used earlier. Everyone turned, murmuring. My father stood beside my mother, stiff as a statue. Dermot was back by the drinks table, sipping from a bottle of beer like nothing had happened. Maureen cleared her throat. "I didn't come back to fight," she said, voice steady. "I came back because the truth deserves its turn." She looked around at us, cousins, aunts, uncles, old neighbors who knew us when we still scraped our knees on the driveway. "This is Dr. Lionel Kincaid. He's a forensic genealogist and researcher. I reached out to him last year." People glanced at each other. Whispers started. She paused, then continued. "I asked him to look into something I've been holding on to for a long time. A truth about our cousin Caroline." The name sliced through the silence like glass. Caroline Fletcher. 16. Died on a hiking trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains in 1999. Fell off a cliff. Ruled accidental. I remember the funeral. I was just a teenager then, but I remember Maureen sobbing, refusing to let go of the casket. Dr. Kincaid stepped forward. Caroline's death was not the accident it was believed to be, he said. After reviewing newly available forensic evidence, personal journals, witness statements, and genealogy data, we have reason to believe Caroline was being tormented by a family member prior to her death. He paused, letting it sink in. There are signs the fall may have been staged to cover up foul play. I felt my knees go a little weak. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Maureen continued. She told me someone was hurting her. Someone in this family. She was scared. She told me not to tell unless she went missing. And when she died, I didn't know what to do. I was 14. I tried to believe the adults. That it was a tragic accident. But I never forgot what she told me. And then, she looked at Dermot. She said it was you. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped their glass. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My father started, blank. Dermot's face twisted in an ugly sneer. That's a goddamn lie. Dr. Kincaid calmly opened a folder. These are photos of Caroline taken days before her death. She had bruises that don't align with the explanation given at the time. We also have excerpts from her journal, kept hidden by someone until recently. In it, she describes being manipulated, followed, touched by an older male relative she names only with an initial. That initial? D. The backyard felt like it stopped breathing. Dermot's wife, Jolene, looked like she was about to faint. Maureen looked down for a second, then back up. The police are reopening the investigation. I've already given them what we found. They're taking it seriously. And they've issued a summons. People started to murmur, not so quietly this time. I looked at my dad. He looked like he was falling apart inside. Dermot was fuming, muttering curses, but no one was listening anymore. He wasn't the loudest voice in the yard anymore, Maureen was. People began shifting in their seats. You could feel it, the doubt creeping into their faces. Not about Maureen, but about everything they'd believed until this point. Some of our older relatives were whispering among themselves, trying to reconcile what they were hearing with the image they had of Dermot, the successful brother, the loudmouth at barbecues, the one who always paid for dinner when he visited. But the silence from my dad said the most. He still hadn't spoken a word. Dermot, still standing near the drink table, scoffed loudly. You people are pathetic. You're going to believe this crap from some fake scientist and a girl who disappeared for half a decade? This is character assassination. But the room, our backyard, didn't react the way it used to. No one laughed with him. No one nodded. In fact, it was my Aunt Willa, his own sister, who stepped away from her folding chair and said quietly, Caroline once came to me with a bruise under her eye. She said she fell. But I remember how she flinched when Dermot walked into the room that day. The whole atmosphere changed again. Maureen didn't say anything in response. She didn't need to. Dr. Kincaid nodded toward Willa. That's consistent with the behavior we've documented. Victims often exhibit visible fear around their torment, and family members usually see the signs, but either dismiss them or don't know what to look for. Dermot's face was a mix of fury and something new, fear. I noticed Jolene move her chair slightly away from him. My dad finally spoke. Is this true? He asked, voice small. I had never heard him sound like that, like a child asking his parents for confirmation that the monster under the bed wasn't real. Dermot opened his mouth, but Maureen cut in. Don't ask him. He's had decades to lie about it. Then she turned to the crowd, our family. I didn't want to ruin my birthday. I didn't even plan to bring this up. But when he shouted at me, I realized something. Silence was what protected him. Silence is what lets Caroline's truth stay buried. And silence is what almost kept me from doing this today. She paused, looked around. I won't be silent anymore. The hum of insects in the background seemed louder than before. Uncle Dermot muttered something about suing for defamation, but he didn't even say it with conviction. His voice cracked halfway through. He turned and stormed off, walking to his car, tires screeching as he peeled out of the driveway. No one went after him. No one even watched him leave for long. Because all eyes were still on Maureen. And Maureen. She looked taller than I'd ever seen her. Not literally, but in a way that made you wonder how much strength a person could hide for years. The crowd broke into smaller clusters, whispering, digesting, some arguing gently under their breath. But no one dismissed her. Not anymore. My mom sat down slowly, gripping her cardigan in her lap, staring at the grass like she was rewinding every moment of the last 20 years. Aunt Willa asked Dr. Kincaid questions. 2 of our cousins left early, claiming they weren't ready to hear this kind of thing. But I noticed one of them later texting Maureen. I finally walked up to her. We hadn't talked since she arrived back. You okay? I asked, quietly. She exhaled through her nose. I don't know. I think I will be. Eventually. I nodded. You believe me, right? She asked. And that hit me harder than anything else. That she still felt the need to ask. I didn't answer right away, which I regret. Not because I didn't believe her, I did. But because I was angry. At myself, for not seeing it sooner. For letting the years go by thinking she was the black sheep when she was just carrying something that none of us had the courage to ask about. Yeah, I said, finally. I do. She didn't cry, but her shoulders relaxed just a little. I'm sorry you had to do it like this, I added. She looked around at the half-emptied backyard. Maybe this was the only way anyone would have listened. And maybe she was right. The next few days were chaotic. Maureen stayed with me at my place in Ashland for a bit, while the rest of the family scattered and picked sides, quietly, through group chats and email threads. My dad didn't say much afterward. He's still processing it all. He said he's going to therapy, which honestly shocked me. I guess seeing the cracks in your family's foundation that late in life makes you either freeze or finally start digging. Maureen told me that Dr. Kincaid had helped bring closure to dozens of families who had cold cases buried under denial and shame. That was why she trusted him. She said it took her months to build the courage to even tell him about Caroline. What got to me was how alone she must have felt. All these years. I kept thinking about Caroline, too. About the bright, sweet girl who always shared her gummy worms with me at the family lake house and made us all friendship bracelets one summer. The more I let it sit with me, the more I realized, we all failed her. Not just Dermot. But the rest of us. We let ourselves be fooled. The following weeks felt like an emotional aftershock, like tremors that followed a major quake. No one really knew what to say to each other anymore. Family group chats went silent. My dad barely spoke when I called him. When he did, it was only about weather or yard work, never about what happened at Maureen's party. But people were talking. Just not openly. I started getting messages, private ones, from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Some said they were sorry for what Maureen went through, others weren't sure what to believe and asked for details like I was keeping some kind of ledger of sins. A few of them admitted to remembering strange things about Dermot, unsettling things from when they were younger that they'd chalked up to awkwardness or forgetfulness. A second cousin said she remembered seeing Caroline crying behind the garage at a reunion in '98, and that Dermot had been standing nearby, stone-faced, watching her. The silence was unraveling, thread by thread. Meanwhile, Maureen and I were navigating what it meant to be close again. For years, we were 2 women living parallel lives in the same orbit, never intersecting. Now we were learning how to speak to each other like sisters again. She was quieter than she used to be, but in a focused way, not withdrawn. Every day, I'd see her sit on my balcony with a notebook and pen, writing in it like she had a mission. One afternoon, I asked her what she was writing. She just said, stuff I should have said a long time ago. We didn't push each other too hard. There was something healing in just existing side by side again. She helped cook dinner. I helped her go through the boxes she'd brought up from Charleston. Some of them were Caroline's. Old photos, letters, even some cassette recordings from the early 90s. We listened to one, Maureen and I sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, hearing Caroline's bubbly voice sing a Spice Girls song off-key into a toy recorder. We both laughed. Then we both cried. It hit me then that Maureen wasn't just trying to expose Dermot, she was trying to resurrect Caroline in some way. To give her a voice after all this time. One night, while we were doing dishes, she said something I'll never forget. I think if Caroline hadn't told me, if she hadn't warned me, it could have been me next. I froze, a soapy plate in my hand. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I didn't have to. What she meant hung in the air, heavier than any other truth we'd uncovered. Maureen wasn't just exposing what happened to someone else. She was protecting the version of herself that might have ended up silenced too. By mid-month, the case had picked up steam. Dr. Kincaid had helped the cold case investigators file for access to sealed family medical records, and it turned out Caroline had been treated for unexplained injuries more than once in the months before she died. The most chilling part? One of the doctors back then had reported a concern to authorities, but it never went anywhere. The family convinced the system it was a misunderstanding. Now, those old files were evidence. Dermot had gone quiet. He'd lawyered up. Jolene left him, taking their son to stay with her sister in Augusta. No one knew if she believed Maureen completely, but she clearly believed enough. At first, my father didn't want to hear anything more about it. He told me he didn't want to be in the middle. That it was too hard to reconcile the brother he grew up with and the man he was hearing about now. But about a week ago, he finally called me, late, past 10 p.m., which he never does. He said he'd gone through an old box of letters, ones Dermot had written to him when they were teenagers. He'd found something odd, a note where Dermot mentioned handling a situation with that little girl, warning Dad not to ask questions. I think I knew, he said, voice cracking. I think I knew something wasn't right back then. It wasn't just guilt. It was horrible. Because it's one thing to learn someone in your family did something evil. It's another to realize that maybe, deep down, you suspected it all along and did nothing. That call left me shaken. And it made me wonder how many other people in our family were sitting with the same truth, buried under decades of silence. Maureen got quieter after that. Not withdrawn, just still. Like she was waiting for something. She told me Dr. Kincaid was preparing a public report. That the media might get wind of it, depending on how the investigation went. I asked her if she was scared. She said no. I already lived through the worst of it, she said. The silence was worse than the truth. Word about the case started to ripple beyond just our family. Slowly at first, quiet mentions in local news briefs, a post on a community Facebook group. Then it picked up. Charleston doesn't forget easily, but it doesn't like mess either. And this was messy. A former teacher of Caroline's reached out to Maureen. She remembered Caroline acting withdrawn in her final months, submitting poems that sounded more like coded cries for help than class assignments. She said she always regretted not saying something. Regret. That's the word that kept coming up. From nearly everyone. Except Dermot. His attorney released a statement denying the allegations, painting Maureen as emotionally unstable, and describing the reopened case as a witch hunt based on old wounds and unreliable memories. But he didn't show up at the second interview with police. And that told everyone what they really needed to know. By this point, Maureen had stopped staying with me full-time. She started looking at places nearby, saying she needed a fresh start but didn't want to go too far. I used to think running was strength, she told me one night. But staying takes more guts. She'd come over almost daily, though. We'd eat, or sit in silence, or work through old files from Caroline's things. Sometimes it felt like we were still teenagers again, up late whispering secrets we didn't have the language for back then. One afternoon, Maureen found a photo, faded, soft-edged, clearly handled many times. It was Caroline, sitting on a tire swing behind the old lake house, sun flaring across her face. Maureen stared at it for a long time before she said, "That's the day she told me." She didn't have to say what she meant. I just nodded. "She told me he followed her to the dock," Maureen said quietly. "That he said if she ever told anyone, he'd make it look like an accident. That nobody would believe her anyway." My throat felt tight. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked before I could stop myself. She didn't flinch. "Because I was 14. And I believed him too." We sat in silence again, but it was heavier now. And then, she pulled out something else, Caroline's last letter. Folded and yellowed with time. It wasn't addressed to anyone. No envelope. Just a piece of notebook paper torn at the edge. "I'm scared all the time," it said. "But if anything happens to me, someone needs to look at him. Don't let them say it was my fault." There wasn't a name, but him was underlined 3 times. It wasn't solid evidence in a legal sense. But emotionally? It was everything. I watched Maureen refold the note and slide it back into a protective sleeve. I realized how many years she must have looked at that letter, held it close, wondering what to do. There's something about long-hidden truths that makes people act strangely when they surface. Some cling tighter to denial. Some get louder. Others go quiet. And a few, like Maureen, gather the strength to drag them into daylight no matter how much it hurts. Our mother, for example, was stuck somewhere in the middle. She started calling me more, but her conversations always danced around the topic. She didn't want to take a side. "I just want peace," she kept saying. "I want my family whole again." But Maureen and I both knew, it was never whole to begin with. My dad, on the other hand, began showing up more. Quietly, cautiously. He didn't try to justify Dermot anymore. He didn't defend the silence. He asked Maureen, over coffee one day, "What do you want me to do?" She didn't ask for an apology. She asked him to come with her. To the police station. She was planning to hand over the last of the documents she and Dr. Kincaid had compiled, Caroline's letter, family photos from that summer, a few handwritten notes from Maureen's own journals about what she remembered. "I need you to stand there with me," she told him. "Not to fix anything. Just to show me you see me now." He went. Later that night, Maureen told me it was the first time she saw her father cry. Not because of guilt. But because he finally let himself believe her. And belief, as it turns out, is a powerful thing. The police station visit turned out to be more than symbolic. The detective leading the reopened case, a woman named Detective Henley, had clearly done her homework. She laid out a timeline of Caroline's final months based on evidence Maureen and Dr. Kincaid had provided. What stood out most was that this time, law enforcement was listening. Really listening. They'd even re-interviewed a few former teachers and friends of Caroline's, including one boy who, back then, said Caroline had confided in him that she was being watched at home. He never followed up. He was only 16 himself, but the memory haunted him. Now, 26 years later, he was helping build the case. Maureen didn't want Dermot arrested for revenge. That's what people misunderstand about justice. She didn't want blood. She wanted acknowledgement. Truth. And consequences. And those consequences came, not in the form of handcuffs, but something worse for a man like Dermot. He was formally charged with multiple counts of child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and falsifying statements in an investigation. The statute of limitations had expired on some of the physical torment, but not all of it. Especially not obstruction, because it turned out that Dermot, years ago, had been questioned by local authorities during the original investigation. And lied. Worse for him, there was now enough for civil action. The family trust, established decades ago by our grandparents and meant to be passed down among responsible caretakers of family legacy, was suddenly up for legal review. Dermot had been managing a large portion of that estate for years. It was how he lived so comfortably in that lakefront home with his sailboat and private dock. Maureen, with support from my father and several cousins, pushed for an injunction to remove him as a trustee. And she won. The trust was redistributed. Dermot's assets were frozen during the civil case. And that was when the public pressure really started to squeeze. A local newspaper ran a piece titled, "Family Speaks Out After Cold Case Reopened in Teen's Mysterious Death." It didn't name Dermot outright, legal reasons, but people connected the dots. He resigned from the board of 2 nonprofits he was part of. His sailing club revoked his membership. His wife officially filed for divorce. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. But it was poetic. The man who once held so much power over everyone through money and manipulation was stripped of his status, one thread at a time. No more influence. No more control. Just a man alone with a reputation that couldn't be rehabbed. And Maureen? She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She just breathed. For the first time in years, I watched her move through the world without that anxious flicker in her eyes. She started volunteering with a nonprofit that helps survivors of childhood trauma navigate legal and emotional systems. She even gave a speech, publicly, at a survivor advocacy event in downtown Charleston. She stood on a stage, under soft amber lights, and told a room of strangers the same thing she once couldn't even whisper to her own family. "My voice is louder than his silence ever was," she said at the end. And people stood up to clap. It was surreal. After everything, we sat outside that night, just the two of us, on the same porch where we used to sit as kids and share secrets. She sipped tea and smiled. "You know what the best part is?" she asked. I shook my head. I didn't have to destroy him to win. I just had to stop letting him destroy me. And I knew then she'd finally stepped out from under his shadow. It took decades, but Caroline's truth was no longer buried. It had risen. And with it, Maureen had reclaimed something she was never supposed to lose, her power. Our family will never go back to what it was. But maybe that's okay. Because the version of it we used to pretend was real? That was never worth holding on to. Now, we started building something better, based on truth, not silence. And this time, Maureen's voice isn't just heard. It's respected.